There are myriad explanations for what supposedly destroyed the 3000 GT's legacy as a Japanese automotive icon. Wait, movies? Racism? Economic collapse? Internet memes? But are those explanations actual reasons? Or were there other factors at work? It was supposed to be Mitsubishi's most important car ever. Like, not just a halo car, but the flagship. A legendary vehicle that would define Mitsubishi itself. Today, it's routinely considered forgotten when it's brought up. People point fingers at all sorts of factors for why it's not on best of lists besides its peers, like the Toyota Supra, the Mazda RX-7, Nissan 300ZX, and Skyline. And if I asked you to quickly imagine the greatest Mitsubishi to come out of the 1990s, you'd probably be thinking of the Lancer Evo or Eclipse GSX. But by all definitions, the 3000 GT should be one of the greats. It was an aggressively styled two-door coupe with twin turbos and all-wheel drive that was sold at the apex of the 1990s JDM tuning scene. I think we need to dig a little deeper past the finger pointing, because for all the people saying that it's forgotten, it sure seems to be unforgotten these days. The 3000 GT is back. Was it ever really gone? I'm Rick Pierce, a history nerd that loves cars and wants to share some car history nerdery. In this episode of One Hit Wonders, we'll dive into the history and legacy of the ill-fated Mitsubishi flagship, the 3000 GT, or GTO, or Dodge Stealth. That's right, it's also a Dodge. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Make a Model. This story begins not in the 1980s, but the 1960s. It's 1968 and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, a mass producer of machinery and appliances, now turned commercial automaker, has just unveiled its newest car, the Mitsubishi Colt Galant. The Colt Galant is an upmarket compact meant to compete with the Toyota Corona, Nissan Bluebird, and Mazda Capella. It's still a small car, but with some fancier equipment for the more sophisticated commuter. A mid-level salaryman's car. For my fellow Americans who didn't recognize any of the above-mentioned cars, the Honda Accord would enter the same market just a few years later, begun as an upscale model of the Honda Civic. This was Mitsubishi's Accord. American automaker Chrysler, having recently invested in Mitsubishi, rebadged the Colt Galant and brought it to the States as a Dodge Colt. It was the very first in what would be a long line of Mitsubishis wearing Dodge badges.
Aren't you ready to join the Dodge Rebellion?
As an aside, the Colt Galant went on to become the Mitsubishi Galant that we all know and love. Well, let's just stick with no. In addition to the two-door coupe, four-door sedan, and five-door wagon variants, Mitsubishi also unveiled a surprise at the 1969 Tokyo Motor Show. A restyled sports car variant of the Colt Galant called the Colt Galant GTO. GTO in the name stood for Gran Turismo Omologata, Italian for homologation, as the GTO was intended to meet requirements for Mitsubishi to enter the JCCA Grand Prix. Designer Hiroaki Kamisago took design cues for the GTO from the first-generation Ford Mustang, giving the base Colt Galant a longer hood with quad headlights and a cut-off rear end with rectangular taillights. Due to the OPEC embargo of 1973 and the rising cost of gasoline as a result, the GTO racing program was canceled before it could get off the starting line, and Chrysler declined to offer the car in the United States. The GTO was originally intended to be Mitsubishi's flagship, but it was quietly discontinued in 1977 despite its popularity among the early JDM street racing scene. So after a few years, it was gone, but not forgotten. The 1980s were a good time for Japan. The post-war industrialization efforts had paid in spades, and Japan had turned itself into a manufacturing powerhouse, exporting not just automobiles and commercial electronics, but significant cultural influence. Increased wages in Japan led to a speculative economy, particularly in real estate and the stock market. And we can probably see where this is going and why it's referred to today as the bubble economy. But in the mid-80s, there seemed to be no shortage of cash, either for the auto manufacturers themselves or the people who wanted to buy their cars. For Mitsubishi, this meant the time was right to bring back a flagship offering, to show the world that it could outcompete Nissan, Honda, and Toyota. They had the money and the demand existed. If they were going to strike, the iron was as hot as it had ever been. The HSR program, standing for Highly Sophisticated Research, began as a top-secret project in Mitsubishi's design and engineering department that was given all green lights to develop the most advanced car ever made. They were told the sky was the limit as to what they could come up with, but it had two conditions. It had to be high-tech, sure, but it also had to be fast. What they developed was the aptly named Mitsubishi HSR, a two-door 300 horsepower turbocharged sports car with four-wheel steering, four-wheel drive, and electronically controlled suspension, steering, and brakes. It had electronic displays, active aero, and topped out at 200 miles per hour. When the car was unveiled in 1987, it featured a white and red livery with black accents that harkened back to the most famous Mitsubishi of all time, the A6M0. The HSR was never meant to be more than a concept, but its purpose was to drum up support internally at Mitsubishi to begin development of a production model based on the engineering and technology. Mitsubishi execs approved the project on the heels of the HSR's successful media blitz, and the project was split into two teams. The HSR program would continue development on what would become the HSR2, retroactively naming the original HSR the HSR1. The HSR2 continued the original HSR's mission to create a radically high-tech sports car. It had 7 computers on board to control even more active aero than its predecessor, and also had onboard navigation, automatic vehicle following, and automatic parking. Listen, it's important to stress again, we're talking about a car from the late 1980s here. The HSR2 was given a twin-turbo 3-liter 6G72 V6 that produced 350 horsepower, and a new silver and red livery that highlighted the active aerodynamic panels. The other team began work on the HSX, a production version of the car with more realistic, but still lofty applications of the technology and engineering of the HSR. The two teams worked closely together, and the HSX would implement as many of the technologies and features of the HSR2 as the team could budget. Both the HSX and HSR2 were unveiled together at the 1989 Tokyo Motor Show to an audience that was blown away by what they saw. Attendees were told that the HSX was going to be Mitsubishi's new flagship. Understandably, they were skeptical, but after seeing the car, the consensus became, if Mitsubishi could put a vehicle that looked anything like the HSX on the market, it was going to have a hit on its hands. How right and wrong they were. The response to the HSX's unveiling at that year's Tokyo Motor Show cemented in Mitsubishi's mind that they had a hit on their hands, and they locked in on what they would call the car when it hit showroom floors: the Mitsubishi GTO. Real quick, instead of asking you to smash the like button and hit subscribe or whatever, if you're enjoying this video, please share it with someone you think might appreciate this kind of deep dive. Thanks all. It was time to bring back the GTO nameplate for their new flagship Halo car. There was just one problem. In the US, there already was a GTO, and it was pretty well known. The last thing that Mitsubishi needed was litigation over its new wonder car. They realized that while they could get away with calling it the GTO in its home market, they were going to have to come up with a new name for export markets. Mitsubishi wanted to maintain a name that evoked Halo car prestige in those export markets, so they chose the name 3000 GT to harken back to the first Japanese GT sports car, the Toyota 2000 GT. The 3000 in this case indicating the engine's 3-liter displacement. Early promotional material showed Mitsubishi playing with the name HSX still, probably while they debated which name to use. Chrysler liked what they saw too. The company had been rebadging Mitsubishis for years by this point: the Conquest, the Raider, and yes, even one generation of the Dodge Challenger. And they knew they wanted to do the same with the 3000 GT. The relationship between Mitsubishi and Chrysler had strained by the late 80s, as Mitsubishi's market power had grown and the situation that led to the relationship was different than in 1970. Chrysler no longer needed to focus on economy cars that Mitsubishi provided, and Mitsubishi no longer needed a dealership network to get a foothold in North America. It now had one. The Starion and Conquest were virtually identical, and Mitsubishi was frustrated that their car was being outsold by a version with a Chrysler badge. There are likely a number of contributing factors that led to this. Most people point to the name Starion chief among them, but Mitsubishi wanted to ensure that if Chrysler sold the 3000 GT in the United States and Canada, they at least had to style it different enough that the two vehicles would compete less with each other. Chrysler obliged, happy to find a platform to reuse design cues from its Dodge Intrepid concept that had, like Mitsubishi's HSR program, been designed to be a high-tech sports car. It was described as the Dodge of tomorrow, and usually that's hyperbole, but in this case it was actually pretty accurate considering how quickly the styling went to market. It couldn't be a one-to-one lift and shift of the design. The Intrepid was mid-engine to start, but most exterior design elements found their way to Chrysler's 3000 GT, now being called the Dodge Stealth, with few changes. The headlights, the taillights, the bumper, fender, and side skirt design, the side scoops, and even the wheel design were leveraged. It's worth noting that the base model Stealth and Stealth ES had Eagle Talon style taillights, a different aero package, and no side scoops. Dodge also added one of the coolest rear spoilers of all time. A lot of people disagree with me on this, but I'm happy to defend my position in the comments. Sound off below, we can discuss it. Listen, it's a cool wing, and I'm just saying that it's super unique even to this day. They did something different with it, and I think it really worked with the styling of the car. Okay. The GTO entered the Japanese market mid-year 1990 as a 1990 model, but the 3000 GT and Stealth, referred to together as the 3S, an abbreviated portmanteau of 3000 and Stealth, both hit showrooms in North America in late 1990 as 1991 models. These 1991 to 1993s are now known as Series 1s. The base model Stealth had a 3-liter 6G72 single overhead cam V6 under the hood that produced 164 horsepower. The base model 3000 GT and SL, as well as the Stealth ES and Stealth RT, were all powered by a 24-valve dual overhead cam version of the 6G72 that upped the horsepower to 222. A twin turbocharged 6G72 was offered in the Stealth RT Turbo and the 3000 GT VR4 that produced 300 horsepower and dropped the 0 to 60 times to 5.1 seconds, beating the Acura NSX's 5.3 second 0 to 60 in a 1991 Auto Week test. The RT and VR4 featured a number of tech, comfort, and performance-oriented upgrades as well. In addition to the electronically controlled suspension, active exhaust sound system, and automatic climate control available on the SL and base RT, the RT Turbo and VR4 added full-time all-wheel drive, 4-wheel steering, a limited slip differential, and one-touch power windows. The VR4 also featured active aerodynamics with automatically adjusting front and rear spoilers that angled themselves depending on the speed of the car. The VR4 nameplate was introduced with the 1987 Galant VR4 and stands for Viscous Real-Time 4-Wheel Drive, referring to the differential and drivetrain. RT in the name Stealth RT is Dodge's high-performance auto group and stands for Road and Track. It's still in use today. Series 1's most defining features are its pop-up headlights, used on both the 3000 GT and Stealth, but each car had different front fascias, as discussed. All GTOs, 3000 GTs, and Stealths were built in Mitsubishi's Ozaki plant located just outside of Nagoya. This plant was called the Nagoya plant during the GTO's production, and is now home to Mitsubishi's museum, the Mitsubishi Auto Gallery. That means that the Dodge Stealth is one of only a small handful of Chryslers that were built in Japan. Not even a claim the Eagle Talon, nay Mitsubishi Eclipse, can make. It's worth mentioning the 3Ss are not DSM cars. I've seen it come up a few times over the years, and there's a little back and forth that happens, but the short version is that while Diamond Star Motors was indeed a partnership arm of Mitsubishi and Chrysler, it was not involved in the engineering and production of the 3S, and all DSM cars were built in Normal, Illinois. Which, yeah, it's a little messy, especially when DSM cars and the 3S shared so many styling cues. Also, how is this not the Diamond Star Motors logo? It was right there, guys. And you went with this? Initial reaction to the 3S was, almost unanimously, positive. Reviewers were impressed with the acceleration and handling and styling and tech features, and above all, the price tag. Mitsubishi had built a comfortable Grand Tour that could go toe-to-toe with other GT cars and upmarket sports cars. But there were a few complaints, and you can probably guess the biggest one that kept coming up over and over in those initial reviews. That's right, the shifter. Despite feeling solid, it had long throws with clunky gearing, and the stitching felt funny. Hold up, did you think I was going to say the car's weight was the big complaint that kept coming up in reviews? It's interesting to look back now, knowing the conversation about the 3000 GT so often revolves around the vehicle's weight. It is the chief topic of conversation in any discussion, and almost immediately the first thing people bring up about the car. The base models hit the scale at just over 3,100 pounds, and the VR4 topped out at 3,750. It was undeniably a heavy car when it was released. Facts don't lie. But that weight didn't impact performance, or at least not enough for reviewers to mention it as detrimental. Road and Track's review noted the vehicle's weight. Not noted that it was a heavy machine running up against its own power to offset that weight. Just a note that it weighed a certain amount of pounds. And MotorWeek's review didn't mention its weight at all. For comparison, the Lexus LC, the closest modern equivalent that I could think of to the 3000 GT, weighs between 4,250 and 4,500 pounds, 800-ish more pounds than the 3000 GT. On its own, the 3000 GT's weight wasn't worth bringing up. But the tone began to shift once the car started appearing in road tests against its competitors. That's where those little stat boxes highlighted the 3000 GT was a heavy boy, and the tide of sentiment began to turn. Suddenly, people were saying the car was more of a tech demo than a serious Grand Tourer. Defenders would point out how fast the car was despite its weight, but arguers just had to point a finger to the weight figure on the page and shrug their shoulders. This fact continues to haunt the 3000 GT to this day. I suspect most people, if asked whether the Mitsubishi 3000 GT or Lexus LC weighed more without looking it up, would select the 3000 GT. The Dodge Stealth largely escaped the same weight complaints its sister had, despite only weighing a little less, but it was dealing with its own controversies. Chrysler was thrilled when it was chosen to provide the pace car for the 1991 Indianapolis 500, selecting the Dodge Stealth for the honor. Immediately, complaints began coming in. Every single Indy 500 pace car in the history of the event was American-built for the uniquely American race, and despite the Stealth wearing a Dodge badge, its manufacturer in Aichi Prefecture raised concerns. Chief among those complaining was the United Auto Workers Union, who organized a campaign that demanded Chrysler select a different car, something built in the United States. Fueling some of the outrage, that year was the 50th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack, reminding Americans of wounds that had not completely healed. The most infamous plane from that most infamous day? The Mitsubishi Zero. This was a common talking point for those demanding the car be changed, and it was often brought up, whether that argument was made in good faith or not. In the end, Chrysler relented to the demands, but not before Dodge had released an Indy pace car styling package for the Stealth to sell in its dealerships. Scrambling to find a replacement, Chrysler chose to run the Dodge Viper prototype instead. The Viper had gotten a lot of attention at auto shows the year before, but wasn't anywhere near ready. Actually, it hadn't even been officially approved for production at this point, so Dodge got to work putting together something Carroll Shelby could pilot at the race. It goes without saying, but the Viper was a big hit and cemented its own production when letters expressing interest started arriving at Dodge's HQ. The Stealth still made an appearance at the race that year, but as the festival car. When Rick Mears won, becoming the first person to win 4 times and doing so with a broken foot, instead of a Viper, he received a Dodge Stealth. Neat. Released in August 1993, the 1994 model year was revised to address some of the concerns customers had with the Series 1. The 1994 to 1996s were called, you guessed it, Series 2. Series 2 cars had slightly revised styling all around, but the biggest difference was the pop-up headlights were replaced with an enclosed projector beam assembly to modernize the car. The brakes were also re-engineered to prevent brake fade, one of the major complaints of the Series 1. A new Getrag 446 6-speed transmission was also introduced that helped maximize the VR4 and RT's power increases from 300 to 320 horses. In 1995, the open-top convertible Spider was added to the lineup as a partnership between Mitsubishi and ASC to engineer a power-operated retractable hardtop 3000 GT. It was the first production retractable hardtop since the Ford Skyliner in 1959 and truly defined the car's climax in terms of technology and weight. The retractable roof option added an additional 400 pounds, pushing the VR4 Spider over the 2-ton mark on the scale.
It was just heavy.
That being said, all other engineering choices, aside from included safety mandates like airbags, had been made in an effort to bring the overall weight down, and the Series 2s were approximately 200 pounds lighter than their predecessors. It was not enough to escape criticism. Rivalry is the furnace that pushes automakers to forge machines that become legends. For Subaru and Mitsubishi, that rivalry began inadvertently in 1993 when both companies debuted their latest World Rally Championship contenders, the Subaru Impreza and the Mitsubishi Lancer. 3 years later, the whole world was watching as the two companies battled for WRC dominance. And with the world watching and sales of the Lancer skyrocketing, Mitsubishi poured money into their rally program, hiring the best engineering teams and drivers, or in this case, driver. Not an easy thing to do in the mid to late 90s. That 1980s bubble economy had burst years ago, drying up interest from consumers for performance cars. Supercars, sports cars, and Grand Tours, they were out. What's it like to be a Grand Tour in an age where the rally car is king? The 3000 GT was still Mitsubishi's flagship, at least on paper. But people were coming into dealerships to ogle the Lancer Evo, not the GTO. Did Mitsubishi's focus on the Lancer end up dooming the company? Maybe. That's a story for another day. Did it end up dooming the 3000 GT? Yes, absolutely. The Dodge Stealth was quietly discontinued, making the 1996 model its last. For the 1997 model year, Mitsubishi updated the 3000 GT one last time. The 97 and up models are known as the Series 3s, the final series. A new hoop wing, similar to the Eclipse GSX's wing, was added to the lineup, and the VR4 received a boldly styled combat wing for the 1999 model, along with some cosmetic changes to the front fascia. But gone was the major tech features. The active aero components were removed to reduce cost and lauded as an effort to save weight. Sales continued to dwindle, not just from a lack of interest, but from market saturation across brands. The 3000 GT was competing with the Toyota Supra, the Porsche Boxster, the Chevrolet Corvette, the Nissan 300ZX, the BMW Z3, the Dodge Viper, the Mazda RX-7, and the Mercedes SLK. It was just too much. But yeah, what a time to be alive. Holy shit. A second generation of the 3000 GT was briefly considered, but ultimately it was decided that there would not be enough buyers to justify the cost of development. At first, it seemed like Mitsubishi could weather the storm of the bubble economy collapsing. By the late 90s, the storm just kept coming. It never stopped. No one buying a car with the Mitsubishi badge on the front was buying a Grand Tour, but they could maybe afford a fun rally-inspired sedan. Not even Jackie Chan's love for the GTO could save it. The removal of the advanced features in the Series 3 was the end for the 3000 GT. Those features are what defined the car. They were the entire reason the car was conceived. Despite what I consider very attractive styling compromises, removing the tech left the car without its soul. The 1999 model year was the last for the 3000 GT. In its home market, the GTO continued for one additional short-run year. And then it was done. Its chapter coming to a close with the end of the millennium. So, That brings us back to today and the 3000 GT being forgotten. Let's address the elephant in the room and just say what everyone is thinking. The 3000 GT is considered forgotten because it didn't appear in any of the Fast and the Furious films. One of the big stars in the first movie was a Mitsubishi, but it was the Eclipse. In 2000, when the movie was being filmed, there was no guarantee that the Eclipse was going to become a JDM icon. That part of its history hadn't been written yet. And again, it's not actually a JDM at all. The producers picked a solid entry-level street machine to get the spotlight at the beginning of the movie, and that happened to be a Mitsubishi. Producers actually considered the 3000 GT instead of the Eclipse, but they weren't impressed with the car before filming began and ended up rejecting the car. Part of me wonders if someone at the studio told the producers that the car was considered heavy and slow in the street tuning scene, and that soured their interest. A Dodge Stealth did make it into the FATF universe, playing a minor part in a 6-minute prequel to Too Fast, Too Furious called Turbocharged Prelude. Brian uses the car to win races as he flees California for Miami, but the car gets impounded in Texas and he buys a junked R34. Despite being the canonical origin of Brian's R34 Skyline, no one speaks, there are no turbocharged preludes, and basically no one saw the film. Probably for the best. So the 3000 GT never made it into the Fast and Furious franchise. But it was in some movies, wasn't it? Well, no. There was one in 1996's Romeo and Juliet, but it was really modified and not shown very much. Thankfully. Yikes. There was one in Pacific Rim, but it wasn't important in any way. And in Beverly Hills Cop, there was one in the background? So it wasn't in movies. It was in games, wasn't it? Well, no. Actually, it did appear in a number, though it was often given a disservice by being made to feel weighty. At least in early games, except the first Gran Turismo, where it was actually one of the best cars you could drive. However, other games making the 3S feel slow just reinforced the weight complaints on early internet message boards and chat rooms by people who hadn't actually driven the car. But getting back to my original question, was the 3000 GT even really forgotten? Everyone these days is rushing to remind you the car exists. YouTube is full of videos about the car, most of which demand the viewer learn about this forgotten legend. Maybe this video is one of them. I actually hope it isn't. People on the internet are quick to call it a failure, even if it wasn't. The 3S actually sold pretty well compared to its closest rivals, with worldwide sales numbers somewhere around 170,000 units between 1990 and 2000. That's more than the Mark IV Supra's approximately 45,000, and more than the FD RX-7's 69,000. Sure, owners are the first to share jokes about its flaws. All that tech isn't getting any easier to work on as it gets older, and all without support from Mitsubishi, which is barely functioning as a car company these days. A transverse V6 with twin turbos doesn't leave a lot of room to work on the bowl of spaghetti under the hood that is the vacuum system. And they even embrace the fact that most people consider it, let's say, rotund. In the home market, base model GTOs were called Camino GTO, God's GTO, after an early internet meme that started as a derision was adopted as a bit of self-deprecating humor. A forums poster in 2001, who only had their driver's license for a month and was driving an automatic, naturally aspirated GTO with the only modification being a body kit, claimed that they beat an R34 GTR on the highway going approximately 85 miles per hour. The post quickly became an early copy pasta, with ordinary spec GTOs being given the title God's GTO. It is still sometimes referenced, now a quarter of a century later. So yeah, for fans and owners, sales figures, business decisions, internet jokes, those things don't spoil the magic of the car itself. The 3S is a success because it gets thumbs ups and smiles. It was never forgotten because there were always fans that celebrated the car. To them, it was never not a success, and it will always be a success. While it remains relatively affordable compared to the Supra or RX-7, prices for the 3000 GT are climbing, supposedly because the owners know what they got. And I guess they do, because BR4s have effectively become unicorns. But all 3000 GTs and Stealths have become cult classics, no matter what trim. Not really a surprise given how everyone's rushing to remind you that these once-forgotten legends are somehow back. 3si.org is still an active forum for owners to share mechanical troubleshooting, pictures of their 3Ss, to organize meetups, and now with almost 3 decades of posts. Newer social media has communities as well. On Facebook, listen, when I said newer, I meant compared to old school forums. There is the GTO OC, and on Reddit, there's R3000GT. 3S GTO, one of the old internet forums, migrated to Discord in 2022 and now has a 3S community there. All three are active and welcome all GTO, 3000GT, and Stealth owners and fans. Maybe the 3S was just too ahead of its time, and put in context of a future we're now in, with whatever it is we're calling Grand Tours these days, the 3S is finally getting the recognition it rightfully deserved. It didn't disappoint reviewers, or GT buyers, or its fans, or even God. Just accountants. Big thanks to all the folks that recommended I do an episode on the 3000 GT. Mikhail Sorsa, Lanehammer 9146, Breakin' Truth Ministries, and Mark Nathaniel. And I appreciate all of you who watched. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my next episode. Patreon patrons, whose names you see on the screen, are currently deciding on the topic of our next video. Right now, it's a tie between the Fiat X19 and the Subaru XT. If you want to vote in that poll, make sure to check out the Patreon, linked in the description below. I'll keep it open for a few more days. Also remember to leave a comment to show YouTube that people still care about these cars. If you just want to let me know that you were here and made it to the end, drop a robot emoji as a representation of how wildly ahead of time the 3S was. It was basically science fiction come to life. Thanks all.